Hello and welcome to the Medical Sales Podcast, and I am your host, Samuel. In this podcast, I interview top medical sales reps and leading medical sales executives across the entire country. And it doesn't matter what medical sales industry, from medical device to pharmaceutical to genetic testing to diagnostic lab, you name it. You will learn how to either break into the industry, be a top 5% performer within your role in sales, or climb the corporate ladder. Welcome to the Medical Sales Podcast. Hello and welcome to the Medical Sales Podcast. We're going to jump right into it. This is our last part with Terry Coutsolioutsos. And, we had such a robust discussion around the experience that customers face now when it comes to specifically medical device sales companies, but healthcare sales companies in general, and really B2B companies, any company that's offering a service in a B2B setting. The customer and what they want to see from sales reps is changing. COVID has played into it. And it isn't just the buying experience, but it's also the owning experience. And that's what we get into with part 3 with Terry Coutsolioutsos. We talk about what the owning experience needs to be for the customer and how companies need to think to make sure they're getting that value to the customer and the customers aren't regretting getting those products and services and looking for a competitor. And we also get into some of his leadership style, some of his own life philosophies, and how sales reps can show up, how leaders can show up, and how he continues to show up in his career. So, as always, thank you for listening to the Medical Sales Podcast, and we really hope you enjoy this interview.
Things are evolving, and millennials are all about experience. I mean, they are. It's just the end of the day, they are. And so are the Ys, and so are the Zs. And they're going to own 70% of the business-to-business buying influential market in 5 years.
70%.
If I keep saying that, it's like, and and there's a lot of change coming with that. Yeah. If you want to be successful.
Yeah. Let's talk about that a little bit, the ownership piece. Get into what you guys are trying to do to get in front of that ownership piece.
Well, I think there's a couple things. When we look at it, we're actually creating a customer journey map, right? And we're looking at the buying journey, and then we're looking at the owning journey. And we're looking at what is the customer, and we map out what we think. And we're actually starting to talk to customers to validate, our assumptions and our hypothesis. But, what are our customers doing on the buying part of their cycle? And then once they've bought it, right, they've signed an order and we've shipped them something. Then you go into the ownership side, and that's where the ownership experience comes into play, which, with Siemens, it's a very complex environment. I mean, we have customers that are buying multiples of millions of dollars of technology solutions with large imaging, large laboratory diagnostic equipment, automation, robotics. There's a lot of installation. I mean, there's a lot of times we're coming in, we're knocking walls down, or we're a part of building a building, and we're rolling in, 2-ton magnets for MRs, and, it's big stuff. And we're working on patient flow. And so there's aspects of, when you talk about that ownership experience, it's what's it like to deliver something of that size, right? What's it like to install something of that size, and the complexity of the installation. Then once it's there, you have to educate, because you're helping them transform too, right? Like, you've got to educate the users on how to use the technology, because again, you want to make sure that when somebody's spending millions of dollars in investment on technology, our job is to help them get the return on the intended investment, right? And so part of that is educating their people and making sure they're using that. And then it's about servicing and making sure that equipment is running optimally and not causing, workflow problems, right? If your an MRI is not working, that's going to cause complexity and hardship and pain for a healthcare system. All of a sudden they have to start diverting patients to different places. All of a sudden they're not capturing revenue. All of a sudden patient satisfaction is dropping, right? So, you're becoming a partner in that ownership cycle, because the goal is that you're creating such a good experience that they become a loyal partner, right? So when they want to buy more of your category of stuff, they've had such a good experience that they're to say, hey, I need 3 more of these things, versus I need 3 more of them, but I'm going to put them out to bid because the last project didn't go very well, right? Or even better yet, that they become a champion or an advocate for your organization. So they say, when you're trying to convert a new customer, get a new logo, and they say, hey, can you give us 3 large healthcare systems like ours? Can you give us 3 references, and can we call them and ask them how it went? Right. And they become an advocate, or they get up on the podium and they say, this solution saved 10,000 patients, or it saved $6 million, or, it created, a better patient outcome or a better workflow, or it made us provide better service to our communities. And so those are the types of things that we're trying to create in that ownership cycle, where we're really deeply embedding. Because here's the thing, that as a seller, it takes 4 times the amount of energy, okay, to get a new converted customer than to keep an existing one and grow it, right? So, you should spend a lot of time growing that customer base. And, depending on your solutions as an organization with a healthcare customer, is that you should spend more time trying to understand, how do you infiltrate other departments, other divisions? How do you bring solutions to different parts of that hospital? Because you're already there, right? Versus, flipping a new logo is, it's going to mean, much more disruptive aspects of more effort, less certainty, and it's harder because you're asking the customer to change something too. That's like, when you're selling something, you're actually selling transformation to a customer. Like, you're selling change, and you actually have to be an agent of transformation to really be an effective seller. Or, again, I always say I'm a seller, but I don't think I've ever sold anything to anybody in my life. I just think I've convinced a lot of people to buy.
Wait a minute, you gotta like that. You gotta talk a little bit more about that. Say that one again.
So I think good sellers don't sell. So I remember when I sold the cardiac rhythm management product, right? And I used to tell the team that you're professional sales people. And they're like, I'm not a seller. I am not a used car salesman, right? And these were people that had grown up, most of my team back then, at least half came from, they were either technicians or nurses in healthcare, and they got into that pacemaker space early on, right? And so they had this negative connotation of a seller. And, and again, selling ice to an Eskimo, right? I just think and we used to reward people, like that person could sell ice. Remember, people would say, what a great salesperson that person was. They could sell ice to an Eskimo, right? I don't think that translates well. I mean, to me personally, I think great, if you want to use the word sellers, right? Great consultants actually help their customers buy the right thing, what's good for them.
Sure.
They always put the customer, I think sellers are company or product or seller centric. And I think that, people who convince customers to buy are customer centric. And it's just on your approach, whether you're looking on the outside in or whether you're sitting with the customer and looking at it from the customer's perspective, I think that's when you convince people to buy.
But I mean, okay, going with that then, those are the ultimate salesmen though. The ones that convince people to buy, the ones that are fully customer centric and really just invite the customer into a solution that they actually need.
Correct. I'm with you on that. It's just a matter of semantics. And I just said, I've just never felt like I have sold anybody anything, right? I've just felt like I've convinced a lot of people to buy stuff, right? And you got to be real with them. And, I can tell you some of the best learning examples were, I was selling this thing called the wall stent, and it was a very flexible product. And we used to compete against J&J and they sold this Palmaz stainless steel, very rigid stent. And I can remember being in cases where there were certain disease morphology that a really rigid stainless steel product, like my competitors, was a better option for the patient than mine. Okay. And I can tell you, I used to have doctors say, well, you're here and, I'm just going to use yours. And I'd be like, nah, that's my mom or my grandmother. I'd go pick the J&J one or go pick the Cordis one. And the doctor would be like, what? And I'm like, yeah, so now that only happened once or twice out of maybe 30 or 40 situations. But when you do that, your customers look at you differently. Like they trust you. And it's all about building that trust and, doing the right thing at all times, whether it's for the patient or whether it's for the customer. And it may not be the best thing that's for you, right? Like but I had no problem. I sold and I was successful enough times that I could throw my competitors a bone every now and then because it was really the right thing to do.
Okay. So would you say with all this change and where we're all headed, that the in-person, we've already established that you still need to talk to the salesperson. You still need to talk to someone at some point. You're saying that millennials want it from more of a question reference point. But would you say that there's actually more personnel and in-person interaction on the ownership side? So almost as we continue, there's going to be even less engagement with the seller on the buying experience. Ultimately, the buying experience might even be 70 or 80%, even in the healthcare space. But as that grows, there's going to be more necessary in-person interaction on the ownership side.
Yeah, I do. And I came out of this Gartner conference again, and it's really about, what I've been reading is that to be successful, you really have to make sure that you're selling every possibility inside your existing customers that you have today. Right. And really work those. And that goes into that buying experience. Like I can tell you on our side, once the customer is signed an order, the work is just beginning to. Like there's a lot of work that goes into owning our stuff. Right. I've sold other products that are implant oriented and it's much more renewable, consumable type product. Right. But it's still like that ownership, doing that implant experience. A lot of companies, have people in the room, have constant training, connecting people together. So that ownership experience is critically important because it helps you keep your business. It also helps you keep you engaged where, you can leverage successes in one part of the hospital to other parts of the hospital or other locations. And again, when you're selling in healthcare today, you're, for the most part, the landscape of healthcare has changed from individual hospitals to now like healthcare is corporate. Like, you look at healthcare systems like HCA, Healthcare Corporation of America, right? You look at Kaiser Permanente. You look at Common Spirit, which is, the new merger between, with Dignity Health. I mean, these are massive, massive organizations that generate, 50, 60 billion dollar. I mean, they are truly Fortune 500 type size companies with hundreds of thousands of employees, right? And so, just because you sold it in one hospital, you as an organization can start trying to figure out how to leverage and work your way through those hospital systems differently than you could before. And if you can't sell at a hospital system level, I think moving forward, I think down the road, that's another transition where I think there's going to be 500, hospital systems in the country versus, 2,000 or 3,000 today. Like, I think you're going to continue to see healthcare consolidate. And it's going to be delivered in the community too. Like, you can't drive down a street in your neighborhood anymore where you don't see an urgent care center or a micro hospital or an imaging center or a LabCorp or a Quest. I mean, you think about it, like, used to be when something was going wrong, you went into the hospital, you drove, no matter where you were driving 15, 20, 30 minutes to a major hospital. Now you're driving down the street. It's in Walgreens, by the way. It's in CVS, right? I mean, everywhere you turn, there's, I have no doubt that in Walmart and you're going to actually have, big box retailers having healthcare. They already have the eyeglasses in Walmart. right?
Right.
I mean, I think it's all going to go in that direction. And so there's more constant, and again, it's about experience. It's about convenience. We talked about millennials from a B2B perspective, right?
Yeah.
Like we're putting healthcare where people can get it and by the way, now you can get it on this,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? I mean, it's totally evolving.
Do you feel that the conglomeration of healthcare and the way it's headed, how we're going to have much less individual operations and much more of these huge, massive organizations, how do you think it's impacting the quality of the healthcare that's actually being received by the patient?
I think over time, anytime there's change, there's always sorts of, variability when change happens. But I do think that, when we talk to healthcare systems, there are four big things that they think about. They think about precision of medicine, right? And removing variability out. So they're trying to create a more standardized approach to healthcare. And so when you go moving things out of one building and you move it into 20 or 30 in the community, there's lots of variability. Like it's one place, now you have 30 places, right? So there's all sorts of opportunity for deviation, right? Just knowing that the human element is involved.
Right.
But, with systems in place, with protocols in place, healthcare is in a much better position to deliver and reduce that variability better than ever, right? So, and again, you do need to have some adaptability. It is human, right? It's, the world's not, totally consistent in every approach, but, it's about precision of medicine. It's about transformation of care. It's about patient experience, right? And digitalization and data, and how are we using all these things to standardize how we deliver care, right? Machine learning, AI. I mean, we're all trying to go and deliver protocols and systems and robotic process automation. Those things will start. There are things that will be reproducible from a machine learning perspective that will keep things more standardized. And then it'll allow for, more creative or more of the art side versus the quantitative side, right? Like we can go quantitative to a certain point, but then sometimes you got to use your brain, right? Sometimes you actually have to think. And like I said, I don't think this is going to be a total machine robotic thing. These are people, but I think people will just be used differently. Healthcare for the longest time, in my opinion, has been one of the most inefficient, business models ever. It's a complex world.
Right.
And, but it's getting better every day. And when I know that, the healthcare leaders that are in place today that are delivering transformation for healthcare in America, we're in a really good place. And we, again, I think we do a lot of things really well. And from a Siemens perspective, we're trying to create that great buying and ownership experience for our customers so they can go at the end of the day, deliver the best healthcare and the best quality of healthcare at a lower price, by the way, because, that's the other thing what's broken about healthcare, I think in North America is not necessarily the quality of care, but it's changing. Like I can tell you, how I look at it personally from my perspective. 20 years ago, my premiums were probably a third of the price, and so were my deductibles, right? And I feel much more like, like when I go to the doctor, I have to ask questions like, okay, how much is that going to cost me? Like I needed an MRI the other day, and I'm shopping around for, imaging centers to get, how much is that going to cost me out of my pocket?
This is excellent, Terry. Well, Terry, this has been an amazing time to spend with you and talk about these issues today. What I really want to kind of come to a close with is you have a really unique perspective and experience because you started as a sales rep, you went through the ranks, truly hard knocks, and now you're here and you had so many different leadership positions, and your role is on the cutting edge of what's going to be happening in the future, how to identify the trends and what to do about them. What's your overall philosophy about this life and how you manage things, that you'd like to share with the audience today?
What do you mean by that? And just be more specific on the question.
Sure. Or what theme would you say you operate by, right?
What theme do I operate by?
There you go.
Okay. Well, I think at the end, like me personally, when I operate as a theme is, I think that in a world that's changing around us, and we'll just talk about change, right? Because I think change is like when you say the word change, just like psychologically, that's a scary word for people. Like when you say change, everybody kind of like,
straight up, right.
Like, like change. And so the world's always changing. And I think you and I have talked about this before, but I believe that the human species actually, again, we transform internally to adapt to changes around us. And so that's where, my leadership style is constantly evaluating and assessing the changing environment and landscape, whether it's internally in the organization, whether it's disruptive things happening in our marketplace with our customers or with our competitors or with new revolutionary therapies or policies or things like that. They're going to change the way we do business or change the way our customers do business. And then how do I help our teams understand what's changing, right? Because, they need to understand like it's something out here is happening in order to get that buy-in for people to want to actually willingly transform. And again, here's the deal. When it comes to transformation, 10% are going to line up in the front of the line no matter what, because they just love chaos. They just want something new, right?
Sure.
And then on the other side, you got 10% that are wearing the cement shoes, and they're never going to change. They are going to be the same people no matter what. There's 80% in the middle that want and are waiting to transform. And it's up to us as leaders as to how much and how fast those people accept and are willing to transform in that process, right? So you've got to create the great story and understanding. So the why, right? The WIFM. So what's in it for them for the change, or why are we? I think there's, that's one thing I've really developed over time is a much better why. I personally don't need a lot of why when somebody asks me to do something, but I think me as a leader, I've learned that, a lot of people need to understand deeper understanding. So what is going on and why we're doing it? And then you have to create a really clear vision for people. What does the other side of transformation look like? And it needs to feel like a warm, sunny beach, right? And, not, cold, icy water. And so, those are the things that when I think about organizationally is that here's what's happening. Here's what's in front of us. Here's what the data says. Here's different options for transformation in order for us to be successful in this new changing environment. And then how do we get there, right? And how do we modify ourselves from a people perspective? How do we modify ourselves process-wise? Is there technology investments that need to be incorporated into some of this transformation? Not all transformation, when people think about transformation in today's, they automatically go to all digital. It's like, okay, it's all about technology. You've got to get your processes and your people transformation done before you even invest in the technology. Because if you put bad processes into technology, it's still bad, right? And so, we spent a lot of time talking about what needs to change behaviorally, what needs to change process-wise. Do our people have the right skills to take on this transformation? Do we need to skill people up? Do we need to give them some development to get them ready for transformation? That's another reason why people are reluctant to transform. It's they don't have a competency, they don't understand, they don't feel comfortable. You've got to do all these things because, again, change is a really scary word. And so you need to help people feel less intimidated and less fearful, because fear is a really what I would consider, it's a hindering factor for transformation. And, and if people are fearing things, they just don't move very fast, right? If they move at all, or if they run in the opposite direction.
Right. And then just leave. Yeah.
So that's what I would just say for me about, moving forward. It's about understanding the landscape, what's changing, right? Doing some research, scaling and developing options of transformation, then working with your team to understand what does that, visualize with your team, what does that transformation look like before you just start. I don't mean over processing it either, because I'm not much of a process person, but I think that you need to get as much collaboration, much alignment as possible, and get at least half your organization moving in that transformation. Like I said, 10% aren't going to. So you're never going to get everybody, right? But you can get the 80% that sit in the middle that are just waiting and looking for a good reason to transform.
Well, Terry, it was excellent having you again on the show. And thank you for all the knowledge you've shared with us today. We definitely have to continue this conversation on a different episode. But thanks for being with us, Terry.
Well, Sam, thank you. And I enjoyed it. Hopefully it made sense to you and your audience. And again, I'll say, I think what you're doing for folks that aren't in the medical device or pharmaceutical space today and want to get there, it adds a lot of value to the marketplace. And I certainly wish I would have had something like this, when I started my career. So I hope people are taking advantage of it.
Definitely, Terry. Thank you for the time.
And that was the last part to Terry C's great interview. He shared so much. If you didn't get a chance to listen to the first two, make sure you go back and listen, because he gave us so much value and insight into the buying experience, the owning experience, what he's done in his own career, and how he continues to show up, and best ways for companies to continue to lead and get the most out of their teams. Again, if you're someone that's listening to these podcasts, you've listened to this episode and you're thinking to yourself, I want to do something different. Whether you want to hop into a medical sales role or transition into a different space within healthcare sales, then you need to make sure you visit evolveyoursuccess.com, select Attain a Medical Sales Role, fill out the application, and if we see that you're a good fit, you're going to connect to one of our client specialists, and we're going to talk to you about how you can get the position you want. And if you're someone in sales and you're thinking about your career, you're listening to something like what Terry's had to share, and you're saying, you know what, I want to make moves like that. I want to do something dynamic in my career. I really want to show up differently this year. I want to make some really big changes, some really big moves. Again, visit Evolve Your Success. And you can also select Attain a Medical Sales Role or Improve Sales Performance and get in contact with us. Or you can reach out to us on LinkedIn. You can find me under Samuel Adeyinka and just send a connection request or send a message. And one of our client specialists or myself will get in touch with you and show you what you can do to get your career where you want it to go. We always do our best to bring you wonderful guests every single week and bring you value and new information about the healthcare sales industry, what's changing, what's happening from people that experience it, and we will always continue to do so. So make sure you tune in next week to another episode of the Medical Sales Podcast. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. And remember, I have a couple programs that show you exactly how to break into the medical sales industry, become a top-performing medical sales professional, and also how to masterfully navigate your career to executive-level leadership. Check out these programs and learn more at evolveyoursuccess.com. Stay tuned for more awesome content with amazing interviews.